Whilst The Lion King, being directly based on Hamlet, is something of an urban myth for pseudo-literary Gen Zers, it's impossible to ignore the similarities, with directors Allers and Minkoff having explicitly stated that they welcome the comparisons to their work and that of the Bard. It's hard not to see parallels in the titular Danish prince and his eponymous feline counterpart, and the themes of regicide, honour and family, amongst much more, that permeate both stories. But for today's video, we'd like to take a deep dive into one specific comparison between these two great tales. Ladies and gents, please enjoy our top 8 similarities between Hamlet's King Claudius and his pernicious animated peer and ruler of Pride Rock. Number 1. Regicide. Perhaps the most obvious similarity is the fact that both characters commit regicide and fratricide. In Hamlet, this event precedes the action in the play, and we first learn of Claudius's murderous act of death by poison in the ear in Act 1, Scene 5, when the revelation is made to Hamlet by his late father's ghost. Indeed, this is reaffirmed later in Act 3, Scene 3, when we see Claudius praying for repentance and admitting directly his guilt to God. A lexical smoking gun, if you will. It should be noted, however, that as critics highlight, Claudius seems genuinely moved in this scene and troubled and at odds with his actions. Scar does not and never does. Whilst Claudius's crime takes place prior to the opening lines of the play, we see Scar's in all its technicolor glory. He sets in motion a plan that begins with a lie to Simba about his father having planned a surprise that lies waiting for him in the gorge.
Father has a marvelous surprise for you.
Ooh, what is it?
If I told you, it wouldn't be a surprise now, would it?
This places Simba in mortal danger when the hyenas then subsequently cause the nearby wildebeest to stampede through the gorge. Mufasa, Simba's doting and protective father, is informed and immediately traverses the labyrinth of wildebeest to save his son. Upon doing so, his attempts to climb out of the valley and away from the stampede are put to an end by his brother Scar, whom plunges his claws into Mufasa, causing him to fall to his death.
Long live the king.
Number 2. Exiled princes. With their victim's son still alive, it is no surprise that both murderous kings in waiting are keen to get rid of the progeny of the deceased. Claudius decides to send Hamlet away to England in Act 3, Scene 1, when Ophelia highlights his descent into madness, and at this juncture in the play, it's possibly an altruistic attempt on Claudius's part in providing respite for his seemingly crazy nephew. This desire to exile Hamlet in England is something he reaffirms amongst other occasions in Act 3, Scene 3, when we see him accosting Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to escort Hamlet to England themselves, following Claudius's realization that now Hamlet is becoming increasingly volatile and more of a danger. Indeed, it has been posited that Hamlet's increasing capriciousness within the play that causes this within Claudius is actually down to him seeing himself more and more within his uncle as the play progresses. Claudius later reveals in Act 4, Scene 3 that part of this contrived exile includes a note to the English king that instructs him to kill Hamlet upon arrival. The trip to England has now become less negotiable and altruistic and far more fatal than when originally floated at the beginning of the play. Thanks, uncle. Scar too is keen to get rid of the kingdom's prince. Perhaps more importantly for him, his planned ascension to the throne cannot be complete with the prince still there. To expedite this, Scar tells Simba he is to blame for the death of his father, and that the shame he will bring upon himself is cause for him to run away.
But the king is dead. And if it weren't for you, he'd still be alive.
Scar seems, in Simba's eyes, to be protecting him from the worst fate imaginable, the shame of his own mother. However, moments later, we witness as Scar instructs the hyenas to kill the young lion cub.
Kill him.
It should be noted that neither Claudius nor Scar is successful in their plans on murder. Both of them use their cunning to escape in this first instance. Number 3, a reliance on accomplices. Each of our characters owe more than a little to those around them. Claudius's management of a vast array of characters predicates the action of the play and his ability to keep away from guilty stares the majority of it. Whilst Polonius, Ophelia, Gertrude and Laertes are all subject to this, we'll touch on them later, so for now let's focus on his use of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. They are originally brought to Elsinore innocuously in Act 2, Scene 2, to draw him, Hamlet, on to pleasures, but later in Act 3, Scene 1, probed more insidiously to tell Claudius more about why Hamlet is acting as he is. In Act 3, Scene 3, Claudius then draws them more explicitly into his web of crimes in asking them to take Hamlet to England and to his death, unbeknownst to them, before later explicitly asking them to clean up the remnants directly of a crime in Act 4, Scene 1, when they are asked to take away the corpse of Polonius. Ultimately, his use of the two, something they only do as they are his subjects, leads to their own death. Scar too is not shy in his less than polite requests for help from those around him. Early in the film, Scar reveals that it is only through his cunning and not his strength that change by him can be brought about.
Well, as far as brains go, I got the lion's share, but when it comes to brute strength...
Here, like
I'm afraid I'm at the shallow end of the gene pool.
Here, like with Claudius, we see a chilling portent for the way Scar must use others to bring a sizable change, given his lack of strength. The key conduits for his plans are the hyenas. It is through them that Scar carries out the vast majority of his trickery. It is they who chase the cubs into the elephant graveyard. It is they who cause the wildebeest to stampede. It is they who chase Simba away for good. And it is they who enable Scar to keep power when he claims the throne. Number 4, false love for their nephews. Despite murdering their fathers and wishing them dead, both Scar and Claudius are masters of deception in their attempts to convince their nephews that they care for them. In Hamlet, as early as Act 1, Scene 2, where Claudius suggests Hamlet should stop grieving for his late father and instead see him, Claudius, as his new paternal figure, he says this. This is a refrain that runs throughout the text, but is perhaps most chillingly used when Claudius, attending the duel in the play's final scene that he himself has contrived to result in Hamlet's death, watches the action unfold and asserts that my son will win when referring to Hamlet, a man he knows is destined to fail. Critics note that Claudius is keenly versatile in his ability to play up towards different audiences when the need arises, and this can be seen here in his sycophancy and throughout the play towards Hamlet. Scar too benefits from Simba's naivety, particularly in the opening act of the film. In their first exchange in one of the caverns of the Pride Lands, Scar tells Simba that he shouldn't go to the elephant graveyard because...
Simba, I'm only looking out for the well-being of my favourite nephew.
He continues this tone of faux concern throughout this exchange while baiting Simba to go to the area in question. This artificial tone is then continued when Scar brings Simba to the gorge for the surprise with his father, saying that...
This is just for you and your daddy. You know, a sort of father-son.
It is this malevolent duality that is both the reason for each of the kings' ascension to the throne and, ironically, the key conduit in their falling from it. Number 5, betraying the prince. Whilst both differ in their speed and manner of exiling the princes within their kingdom, Claudius and Scar are united in the duplicitous nature in which they act towards them, or behind them. Seeing the aggressive volatility of Laertes' return in Act 4, Scene 5, Claudius pounces on the fact that Polonius has been murdered as a means to steer Laertes' bloodlust and the attention away from him. He is quick to suggest that Laertes will of course be looking for revenge, and is very clear repeatedly to distance himself from this crime and ensure Laertes knows he is moved by it. Moreover, in Act 4, Scene 5, Claudius is quick to tell Laertes that he is happy to reveal his father's killer, and then does the following scene. Claudius is generally happy to use this crime as something to cover up his own dastardly deeds that themselves led to the death of Polonius. Indeed, as critics highlight, it should be noted that it is only really following Hamlet's play within a play that Claudius becomes truly tyrannical in his betrayal of Hamlet. We've already seen the moment where Scar manipulates Simba into thinking it was him who was to blame for Mufasa's death, but this is also a stance he reiterates when Simba returns to the Pride Lands at the end of the movie, when he exposes, quote-unquote, Simba as having murdered Mufasa.
Well, Simba, now's your chance to tell them.
Tell them who is responsible for Mufasa's death.
Number 6, master manipulators. Perhaps most overtly, it is both kings' ability to manipulate others that leads them to and allows them for a period to remain on the throne. Claudius is very malleable in his ability to command and be commanded in order to exercise this manipulation. Whilst we previously mentioned that it is Rosencrantz and Guildenstern who are used most consistently, it is his manipulation of Laertes that is perhaps most profound and that has the biggest impact on the end of the play. In Act 4, Scene 7, and without any context for his father's death, Laertes has his thirst for revenge stoked to such an extent that he's willing to kill Hamlet in a staged duel by using a more potent sword, which should be dipped in poison. And he then acquiesces very quickly to Claudius having yet more poison on standby should plans A and B not come off. Such is the power of Claudius's manipulation that Laertes, who was only 2 scenes previously leading a mutiny against Claudius, now says in deference, "My lord, I will be ruled." Indeed, critics note that this power of manipulation and deference to Claudius, this power of manipulation and deference to Claudius seems to ripple across the kingdom throughout the early stages of the play. Perhaps even more than Claudius, every interaction Scar has centres around deceit and manipulation. It begins in our first interaction with him when he plays dumb, not knowing about the day of Simba's presentation to the animals.
Must have slipped my mind.
He tricks Simba into going into the elephant's graveyard. He manipulates the hyenas into doing his bidding by being their prime source of food. Look in this clip at their Pavlovian response as he waves a leg of zebra meat, showing their physical dependence on his providing
Bring us
food.
anything to eat, Scar? Old buddy, old pal, huh? Did you?
I don't think you really deserve this. I practically gift-wrapped those cubs for you, and you couldn't even dispose of them.
We've seen how he tricks Simba into going alone into the gorge, but he also tricks Mufasa into going into the gorge to rescue
Quick!
Simba.
Stampede in the gorge. Simba's down there.
He lies to Simba to get him to leave the Pride Lands. He builds an empire based on the retention of power above the needs for his subject, as you can see from the conversation he has with Sarabi, and then immediately lies to the lions about Simba having killed his father upon Simba's return. Then he blames the hyenas for the downfall of the kingdom when it seems to be curtains for him, before reneging on this when the hyenas have him in the corner. King of manipulation. Number 7, mutiny. As the reign to both Claudius and Scar play out, so too their masks slowly begin to slip when their subjects see them for who they really are. By the end of the play, all of Claudius' subjects are aware of his deceit, even if some of them perish as they find out. Laertes, Hamlet, Fortinbras, Horatio, the attendant spectators, they know that it is Claudius' impotent rage that has caused the downfall of the Hamlet family. However, signs of mutiny and discontent are seen earlier in the play in Act 4, Scene 4, when Laertes returns from France. A messenger reporting his return describes the revolt that has begun around Elsinore and how Laertes is now the people's choice for king. But, as scholars highlight, this moment comes at a point where his kingdom's faith is in rule and the entire kingdom has begun to waver towards Claudius significantly. We're not as privy to Scar's reign as directly as we are with Claudius, the way he manages the kingdom or the demonstrative knock-on effects it has, but it is Nala's journey into Timon and Pumbaa's jungle that comes about due to her need to find food, as there is none in Scar's kingdom, something she expands upon later in a conversation with Simba.
He let the hyenas take over the Pride Lands.
What?
Everything's destroyed. There's no food, no water.
Later, shortly before Simba's return, his mother Sarabi is called to Scar, who wants to know why her hunting party no longer bring food to him.
It's over. There is nothing left. We have only one choice. We must leave Pride Rock.
We're not going anywhere.
Then you have sentenced us to death.
Finally, when they realise that Scar can no longer provide food for them, and after overhearing him betray them by referring to them as the real enemy, even the hyenas turn against their master, and it is they who ultimately kill him. Number 8, killed by a prince. And finally, and dripping in restorative irony, both kings are killed by the sons of those they vanquished, kind of. In the final scene of the play, Hamlet forces Claudius to drink from the poison cup that killed his mother and that was planned for him. It should be noted that Hamlet's murder of his uncle needs to be contrived in a more subtle, meticulous way, given the close quarters the two spend the play within, a set of parameters that Simba is not limited by. Scar's death is less overtly connected to Simba because Disney. Following their fight on Pride Rock, Simba defeats Scar and casts him into a pit with the hyenas, who, it is strongly intimated as the camera pans to a cutaway shot, rip Scar.
No, I didn't mean it. No, no!
While Simba is seen to return to the scene, Hamlet is not quite so lucky. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's video, ladies and gentlemen. Whilst the theory that The Lion King is directly based on Hamlet is an apocryphal tale, there is certainly more than a few subtle echoes, as we have seen in today's video comparison.